My name is Ben Percival, and this is part two of Specket's Salesforce training series, designed to help admins and Salesforce professionals level up their skills, become more well-rounded operators, and most importantly, make a bigger impact at their organizations. In the last episode, we covered how to design content that's optimized for just-in-time learning. In this episode, we'll cover some strategies to serve that content up to the right people at the right time and to improve user experience. In other words, how to make Salesforce easier to use. First, we'll go over an intro to user experience design, followed by some best practices. Then we'll go over several ways you can implement these best practices into your Salesforce org. Let's get into it. Let's dig into why Salesforce can be hard to use. Many end users have a negative association with Salesforce. Check out a couple of memes from Dually, one of many companies that exist, at least partially because people have issues trying to use Salesforce. End users often view it as a necessary evil rather than something that can help them in their day-to-day role. They might get confused by it or not know how to navigate it. They might not see value from it. They might not be getting any value from it. Here's a quote from a book called The Design of Everyday Things. The same technology that simplifies life by providing more functions in each device also complicates life by making the device harder to learn, harder to use. Salesforce, which can be customized to fit nearly any business model, industry, or use case, can be also incredibly difficult to learn and use. It's always being changed and improved, and even if someone used Salesforce in a prior company, it could be a completely different experience to what they use now. Many of these problems can be addressed through enablement and following user experience design best practices. Taken from the Trailhead module on this topic, UX design is the practice of examining people's needs and motivations to inform the design of the overall experience with a product or service. It involves deeply involving end users on the solutions you create for them to make sure that what you're creating actually solves their problem. As a Salesforce professional, you're probably used to staring at and navigating around Salesforce all day. Something that is second nature for you can be a foreign concept to your end users. Think about related lists versus list views, or even the relationships between different objects. So when creating training materials or designing processes, it's important to get into their shoes and remember that not everyone has the same level of background knowledge or experience. I'm for sure not an expert in UX design, but it's one of those things where even just diving a little bit into that world can go a long way. The Trailhead module, which we'll include in the additional resources below, will give you UX principles to live by, so you can read through them and think about how you'd apply them when designing user experiences. Here are a few examples. Clarity. Keep things simple. Eliminate ambiguity. This might include reducing the number of extraneous fields on a page layout. Efficiency. Anticipate needs to help people work better, smarter, and faster. Can you think of ways to serve up information or support to users in a process before they even need to ask for it? Occam's razor, the simplest solution is almost always the best solution. Over-engineering a solution is usually a bad thing. And Hick's law, the more options and complexities, the longer it takes to make a decision. Think about ways you could reduce the options in a process to speed it up and reduce errors. Along with these principles, you also get an introduction to different UX frameworks that help tie everything together. So it's been established that involving end users in the design process is critical. So let's review some best practices for doing just that. Understand the problem before defining solutions. Building a solution is fun, but it doesn't do anyone much good if it's not solving the right problem. Many times an end user's request might not address the underlying problem, so try to frame it as solving for a problem instead of just accepting solutions. Ask questions. One way to dig into the problem is to ask a lot of questions, like probably an annoying amount of questions, but discovery is super important to uncovering the root cause of an issue. Shadowing can be a great tool. It can be a great way to see how users think about their day-to-day and figure out where improvements can be made. They are experts on their workflows, and you are an expert on the system and tools that they're using. So through shadowing, you can gain insights that you didn't know about and provide additional solutions that can make their lives easier. If you're in an office, you can ask to peek over someone's shoulder while they're working through a process. It's a little bit harder if you're remote, but you can have them do a screen share or have them record a video and tell them to think aloud and talk through what they're thinking when they're going through a process. And lastly, you can use mistakes as learning opportunities. Instead of getting frustrated with people when they make mistakes or don't know how to do something, you can use it as an opportunity to look into how your training or user experience can be improved to prevent that from happening again in the future. So that's a bit of background on design and working with end users. Next, we'll dive into specific Salesforce features and examples that you can implement at your orgs. Pairing UX design best practices with these features will make Salesforce easier to use for the people you work with. Better user experience leads to better adoption, which leads to other downstream effects like better data quality and overall performance. We'll look at rich text page components, the utility bar, paths, record page layout design, and lastly, screen flows. The first thing we'll look at are rich text components on Lightning page layouts. So it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's a bit of rich text that you can place anywhere on the screen. And you can do bulleted lists, fonts, different formatting, including hyperlinks. You can also hide them on these like accordion components if you want to include links to additional resources. So you can link out to other training materials that people might need without them having to go look for it. And the really powerful thing about this is you can do conditional visibility based on like values in a field. So for example, if we see that this contact has changed companies and we want to hang on to the historical record, if we mark this as no longer with company, our team will now see a little warning sign here saying, heads up, they're no longer with the company, so they know not to reach out to this person. So you can get pretty creative with this, especially with the conditional visibility, depending on things like opportunity stage, um, industry, things like that. It all depends on like what information that you want to surface. To manage these components, you'll want to go to the Lightning page that you want to edit. And then if you hit the gear, you can go to edit page. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a list of all the components. So if you search for rich text, it should show up and you can drag and drop that onto the page. For the conditional visibility, if you click on a rich text component, at the bottom, you'll be able to set the component visibility. And then from here, you can add filters. So this can be fields on the object. It can be the device that the user is on. And then it can also be things like the user's profile if you want to include things that like only admins can see, for example. But yeah, a lot of options with this. It's super flexible and pretty easy to implement. These are available both on record pages as well as like app home pages. So for the home pages, which might be the first page that people see when they log in, it's pretty good to add like announcements. We have links to dashboards that are often used, link to our marketing calendar, for example. A lot you can do with these. Another feature that can be pretty helpful is the utility bar, which you can see at the bottom of the page here, kind of out of the way. But this will follow users wherever they are in an app and provide easy access to whatever you want to put in them. So since this is a sales app, you can include like a new leads list view and give them a quick look to any open leads. You could also include things like links to helpful material, and then you can also do things like embedding a visual force page if you had like a form or something in a different system so that they could submit it pretty easily anywhere that they are within the app. When you navigate to the app that you want to edit in App Builder, you'll be able to go to utility items. And then from here, you can change like the width and height of the panel that you want to edit, what icon is shown, and then choose like whatever you want to add. So it's kind of nice since it's at the app level. If you have different types of users in different apps, you can display different utility items to them. So only what's useful to that particular person is shown. Paths can be a great thing for user experience because it gives a good visual representation of a status or a project. So it's this bar across the top of the record here. A lot of the times you'll see them on like opportunities or cases. You can also use them for like lead or contact statuses. I think we have one for a custom onboarding object as well for like onboarding stage. And what it shows you the step that they are in the process. And then if they open it up, you can choose key fields for each step and then also provide rich text guidance for success. So you can include links or instructions on here, and it'll be different for each stage. So you can edit this in path settings in setup and choose what fields show up and then the guidance for success just to help people get through processes. Another really big thing you can do for user experience is just to take a step back and look at the design of your record pages. A lot of the times you're just going to be inheriting a Salesforce org from either past admins that have worked on it, maybe a bunch of different consultants have worked on it. Process is always changing, so it's good to take a look at just like what fields are on the page and if they're all being used and if they're all required, are they grouped logically? All of these things are going to have an impact on the user experience. So if users are used to seeing a bunch of fields that are irrelevant and that they don't need, they might be conditioned to ignore new fields that are on the page. So to get rid of fields that you don't need, you can use a couple of different like apps off the App Exchange, like Field Trip or Field Spy, and those will tell you which fields are being used for each object. So you can take a shot at that to remove any ones that you don't need anymore. It's also important to try to structure the layouts similarly for objects in Salesforce, so that way people know where to look. So for example, on all of the objects in Salesforce, I try to do the highlights at the top, related list, quick links, um, details on the left-hand side, and then activities timeline on the right-hand side so that users kind of like understand where they should look for things, even if it's on a different object. Taking a deeper dive into like opportunities, you don't need to get fancy with like the naming of your sections. In this example, I've just named them by opportunity stage, and this kind of lets the reps know what they should be thinking about in each stage and what they should be filling out. Um, you've got also contact roles on the right hand side. This is just something that they'll probably be looking at a lot, so you can have that shown to them directly instead of them needing to go to the related list quick links. And then also with dynamic forms, since all of your fields don't need to be in the same section, you can separate out any like long, rich text note fields that they use onto a different tab. And then also, if you're using any sort of meeting recorder like Chorus or Gong, you can include that on the opportunity page as well. So they can kind of get everything that they need from one page, and they don't need to be going to different sources to get what they need. And lastly, screen flows. Screen flows are probably my favorite way to improve user experience for specific processes. There are custom screens you can create that will appear as either pop-ups launched by a button on a record, or you can just embed them on the pages themselves. They're super powerful and flexible, and you can give users a guided experience through a process, introduce automation, and generally make data entry a little easier. Salesforce has been making a lot of improvements to screen flows over the past few releases, making it easier to use fields from records within the flow instead of needing to create your own elements, and also introducing things like data tables as well. So if you think back to some of those UX principles like clarity and removing complexity, screen flows are a great way to accomplish that. There's not going to be enough time to walk through how to create one in this video, but we can go through a couple of examples to spark some ideas. Here's an example of an opportunity screen flow that's launched from a button. So if you click next stage, it'll pull up a screen flow that looks at what stage the opportunity is in, and then presents the fields that are needed for that particular stage, making it easy for the person to fill that out. So as you can see, you can include basically any type of field. So like you've got date, text, pick lists, multi-select pick lists. You can even add some ones that are only available in Flow, like displaying a multi-select pick list as checkboxes, lookup fields as well. And then once they go through this and check all the boxes, they can move on to the next stage. This is a screen flow also launched on an opportunity that allows reps to easily create an expansion opportunity. So with screen flows, you can grab data from the existing opportunity and display things such as like the account name, the current ARR of the company, and their current number of users. And then it lets them enter a smaller number of fields than they would if they created a brand new opportunity on their own. So when they go through these steps and hit create, it'll automatically create that opportunity for them. This is an example of a screen flow that's embedded on an account page layout, and it's built to summarize information for the rep. So when you open it up, it pulls data from the account and related opportunities and contacts into a text format. So it'll display like when the last lost opportunity was, how many days ago it was, and what the reason was. You'll also see contacts associated with that opportunity. And then at the bottom, you'll see a data table with all of the relevant contacts at the account, the last time contact was made, and their status. All of these screen flows are designed to make the lives of the users easier, either by aggregating data, introducing automation, or guiding them through a workflow. So if you're able to run through good discovery with your team, you can learn more about their day to day and figure out ways to make it easier for them. And with that, it's a wrap. To summarize, we went over an introduction to user experience design, best practices for involving end users in the design process, and Salesforce features and examples that you can apply to your org. With the first session on designing good training content, and this one on how to deliver it to users when and where they need it, you'll be setting your team up to be successful and positioning yourself to make a big impact at your company. Thanks for